Let's see if this works. All right, good. You got the 3, the 2, and the 1. It's your man DJ Seko Varner. I'm doing the Fly Guys podcast with my brethren, my brother from another mother and father, Dan Tres Omi. Salute that, brother. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Peace, everybody. Peace and love, and I'm doing awesome, man. I can't complain at all.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, tonight is you and I, and one of the things that I wanted to kind of chat on is some feedback that we received on one of our previous episodes. That episode is when we had Crumb Snatcher and Sam, and we were discussing the changes that need to happen in the school system. And we had a little bit of feedback, some replies on YouTube, and I'm pulling it up now, from 2 young ladies. One's named Life's Essence, and the other one is Shala Shafino. And you got a chance to reply to both of them. I think I did too. But I wanted to kind of flesh out our replies to them. And I think the most important reply dealt with this young lady, Shafino. So as you can see, she talked about how she first liked our perspective on things. Mm-hmm. But she was sharing that she has a young son and she's raising him by herself. He's intelligent. He does well in school, makes straight A's and B's, but he brought home a D, and he doesn't like studying at home. She mentioned later on that, he does his homework. He does the requirement, but he doesn't like doing advanced study. And she left us with an ashe, so ashe to that, sister. And brother, I know you got a chance to respond to her. So we're looking at a single parent raising a son who is saying, my son is not achieving the way he used to in school. Secondarily, he's not putting forth the extra effort. So what message are we going to leave with this young lady?
First of all, I just want to say a couple of things. Number one, there's studies that show that boys in particular, when they reach about the 4th or 5th grade, they actually start disliking school. Right. There's several reasons for that. And I'm gonna be honest with you, and I'm glad that she brought up that he's about to go to middle school, because I taught middle school, and let's be honest, the material doesn't suit us. I think Crumb Snatcher talked about it in that segment about what we did on education, and a lot of it is quite boring. I'm gonna be the first to admit it. Outside of the math and the science, a lot of it is quite boring. So that's number one. Number two, the biggest issue that I have is that, to be honest, the way we assess our students doesn't really assess how intelligent they are or how quickly they pick up the information. Because what I've learned is the students know the information. They just, the way we expect them to regurgitate it to us is not usually conducive to them, right? So I know, here's an example. I had a student that he loved using the Rubik's Cube. That was just his thing. That was how he expressed himself. I mean, this guy was amazing, the stuff he could do. And so I figured out how to have him do his assignments through the Rubik's Cube, right? So, again, just because to the average educator, he's probably somebody that should be in a different class. And I think that we do a disservice to a lot of students who don't learn how we expect them to learn. So that doesn't mean that your child is not dumb or anything like that, or the other kids are smart. It doesn't mean that at all. And I think you touched upon this too when it came to Joaquin. You talked about it. So I don't want what happens a lot of times is that we think something is wrong with our child when they're bringing back these low grades. But actually, it's, like I said in the beginning, it's actually kind of normal for boys to see their grades slump when they're in the 5th and 6th grade on average. And then some of them adjust and start, I'm going to just do the work. And obviously capable. So I think, to be honest, I think he'll be fine. And I think he'll grow out of it and he'll start going back to getting good grades. So I don't think she has anything to worry about. I think she's doing a good job.
Yeah, I salute the work that she's doing. And I also like the fact that she's concerned and she's cognizant that things are going downhill. Mm-hmm. I do think that there are a couple of things. And, I mentioned that, that men in general will take advantage of the things that are given to them and cherish the things that they work for. So with that in mind, I do think it would benefit her to challenge him to make him work for some things, maybe to tie some achievement, not necessarily success, but achievement to some of the things that he wants in life, you know. And I also believe that at the time when the schools stopped being attractive and intriguing to our young boys, that's when the time when the parents and the community needs to step in.
I agree.
We need to find ways to excite them. So, you know, Crumb Snatcher made a really great point, you know, as profane as it may have been, that, you know, when you're studying to become a doctor, you do a residency where you're actually living the life and you're learning the information while you're actually partaking in the activities. And so I think it's even been more beneficial, or not necessarily more beneficial, but I think it's important that at the point when our young people start losing interest with school, we put them in situations and experiences where they see what they're learning in real life. For instance, you know, I live here in Virginia Beach, Virginia, not too far from Williamsburg. So when my children, you know, my son in particular, was studying Williamsburg and some of the things that happened, we went to Colonial Williamsburg and we pointed out, you know, we did the tours and I gave them the background information on, you know, the sale of enslaved Africans and things that happened with the indigenous and you know, the indigenous and the Indian people that were there. So we did a lot of fun stuff together around that topic. And I know in Virginia, it's a little easier because we have the SOL. So all you have to do is look up the SOLs. And as a parent, you can find out what your child is going to be studying the next 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, you know, following the pacing guide next year. And you can do an early introduction to all that information for your child. So I think that, you know, Sister Shafino, if she were to look at whatever the curriculum is coming forward, you know, looking forward, and expose her son to the information early in a fun way, when he gets in the classroom, he's going to have intimate knowledge of that information. He's going to seem smarter. He's going to do well on the test. And then he's going to feel better about his ability to achieve. And when you feel good about something, you actually work at it harder. You know, like when you started doing capoeira, when you became pretty good at it, you started working and becoming more of a capoeirista. I think that's the term for it. You put the work in, but you had to succeed at some level first.
True.
And I think the same thing can happen to that young man.
True. That's good. Good points. Good points.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So you mentioned that you taught middle school.
Yes, sir.
What is the reason that, I mean, not the reason why, but what are some of the things that you did in your classroom to make sure that the young men stayed involved and interested?
Here's what I did a lot of that initially the students were wary of, and that's again, it's because of the school system. So I made my classroom discussion heavy. I really made it discussion heavy. Here's the material. We're going to discuss it. This is what we're discussing this week, and we're going to really discuss it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to also throw in current events, and we're really going to discuss it. And you know, any opinion is open. Say what you got to say. And at first, a lot of them were reluctant to do it because they're used to, here's the material, it's going to be on the test, and this is what you got to do. Or they'll do stuff like they use those what they call those sheets, those study sheets where they just put everything on paper. You know,
right.
So at first they were kind of like they're not used to it, but then slowly and surely they became more involved. It got to the point where oftentimes I would say, this is the topic. Come on in, and I would let certain students lead the discussion. And a lot of times I just sat back. All I did was make sure, you know, not one person dominated the conversation, and I made sure that everybody had a choice to speak, had time to speak. So I think that was important. And on Fridays, what I did was, the way I assessed the students was, it was kind of like an open mic. How do you want to explain the information that we learned? Do you want to present it to me in a rap form? Do you want to do a video? Do you want to do a PowerPoint presentation? How do you want to do it? And a lot of students were open to that because I allowed them to use their own media to explain it. And a lot of them would always blow my mind. You know, it's just like some of them, you know, you got some students that are great writers. You got some that are good speakers. You got some that are good at art. You have some that are good with, you know, particularly the physical ones. They always wanted to do skits.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to assess them that way. And it worked out. It worked out. So every now and then I have someone who say, I didn't understand how to do this, and I might have to give them an extra day to do the assignment. But it worked out. It kept them engaged. It kept them wanting to learn more. What it also did was they would go home and research, and then they would go home and talk to their parents. And that was really what I wanted them to do. I wanted them to start talking to their parents about the material and really start engaging their community. So it worked on so many different levels. And it just made my class very high energy, very exciting. The students always look forward to coming to my class.
You know, you're making a good point, because you helped increase their engagement by making the activity, the learning activity, personal to them.
Yes.
And we're saying the piece. Yeah, we're saying exactly what needs to happen. We're saying those pieces that need to happen. It needs to be engaging. They have to be personal to them. And engaging the parents is key, man, because, the parents, many times the mother, but, depending upon the family situation, whoever the dominant parent is going to be the first teacher for that child.
True, very true.
And so, involving the parent only makes a lot of sense.
True indeed. And I got a lot of, my mom and my dad used to always say that, but I thought they was crazy, but I guess they're right. Or I'll have they'll be like,
yo, I got to butt in. Isn't it funny how the older you get, the wiser your parents seem?
Yeah, exactly. So they be like, I thought my dad was, and I'm like, he's telling the truth. And that was cool too, because I had students that would say, for example, we were talking about, what did we talk about? We were talking about one of the hurricanes in Houston, right? So I had a student who was like, my dad, he was the National Guard. They sent him down there. And I was like, can he come in and speak? Like, and she's like, you want him to? I was like, yeah. And he was like really excited. And it was just a way how we talked about how the federal government reacts to natural disasters, how they treat Black and brown folk. And it's one thing for me to bring news articles and show you a history book, but it's another thing for me to bring somebody in the community that's been there and they're able to discuss it and ask questions. And, it was really engaging. And it also really strengthened their bond. Like, that was really probably the biggest thing that I got out of it. And it showed them that our people have value, like your family has value. Like they're a part of history. And we're all living, breathing history. And I think that was probably the biggest takeaway I got from it.
You know what? I mean, I think you just brought up another interesting point. That child whose parents showed up in the classroom, they probably worked a lot harder that day. Yeah. So since they worked harder that day, they probably achieved more. And when you achieve more, you work harder at it. So just by that parent showing up that day, it enabled the child to get in a cycle of wanting to do work and achieving higher, wanting to do more work and achieving on an even higher height. So I think it would be interesting if Sister Shafino showed up at her child's school and maybe just, talk to the class, or maybe just tutored people in the class who are having a hard time, just showed up at the class, and then her son will probably, want to show off by achieving for his parent. And that might even lead to him doing more work.
And, and I noticed that, even with my kids, my other kids, like the students that achieve more and do a lot better are those students that the parents are usually engaged with the teachers, volunteering, coming in, doing the extra work, helping out. And I think across the board, I've always seen that, with all my kids, the parents that did that, their students usually, they were always on honor roll. They always did better. I had in my breakdancing club, I had a student. His dad was he was in charge of the mentoring program for both schools, and he was just when he came to my breakdancing class, I was just like, man, this kid is. I didn't know he wanted to be a breakdancer, and then he came in, and I was just like, wow, this kid is awesome. But he's like across the board a high achiever, and then his siblings are the same way too. So
that's what's up. And that's a b-boy class in Ohio, right, Dayton?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yo, man, as you see, I have on my scarlet and gray today. I'm representing Ohio State Buckeyes 08.
I know. I see. So.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, left when I was 8, moved to Columbus, Ohio, and some scarlet and gray is dear to me. I had to wear it every Friday. Got extra points in high school for wearing scarlet and gray. Yo, salute to everybody at Columbus Alternative High School. Yeah, I grew up in a alternative high school. That's why I think so differently, probably. That and the Maria Montessori school I stayed in back in the day. But yeah, man, I find that parental involvement is key. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a whole series of lectures at a high school, Green Run High School in Virginia Beach, Virginia, that's open to the whole community. And these lecture series is to develop leadership abilities. And the way we have it marketed is for the young men, 6th grade through 12th grade, and their families.
Cool.
All right, so the great thing is they're going to get presented with some great content. They're going to receive some great information, some great motivational information and content in general, but they'll also be there with their parents. So at the end of the event, they'll be able to walk out and have a discussion with their mother, with their father, their stepfather, their stepmother, whoever is their parent, about what they just learned. And the parent then can always refer back to one of those lessons as they interact with that child the remainder of the year.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I've realized that, like, one of the reasons that, for people who do go to church, one of the reasons that works in the degree that it works is because as a frequency, there's a discussion, there's a dialogue around some values. And one of the things that I've known that happens in synagogues is they talk about strategies for money management, community management, asset management. So the children who grow up in synagogues get even more information on strategies that seem to work. And so if we can imbue our students and our families and our communities with strategies and great information on a regular basis, and the young people and the parents can then talk about those things when they get home the next week, for the next year, for the next 3 or 4 years, man, we can really make some big changes, bro.
And I agree with that part. And I think a lot of it has to do with familiarity, like what you're familiar with, what you're used to, what you're engrossed in, what you're absorbing. If you have that around you consistently, it becomes a good habit. Those will just become good habits that you get, when you start them young, as they get older, they're going to continue to have those good habits. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Now back to Sister Shafino. She mentioned that her son was in a private Christian school and it worked, and he was 2 grade levels ahead of the game. And then when he went to the public school, he just started having a lot of problems. So I also think, I want to say one last thing to Sister Shafino. Your son's not being challenged. Yeah.
I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. He knows the work. He knows the work. It's clear that he knows it. Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of interesting when you know the content, at times you just don't feel like dealing with it.
But like you said, he's not being challenged.
Yeah.
He's not being, he knows the work. He was 2 grade levels in the other school. He was challenged there. He comes here, he's not challenged.
Now, one of the things that I thought was really intriguing is that you told her if the child's father is not financially supportive, put him on child support.
Yes. Yeah. And I
also heard you.
Was that?
I was going to say, okay. I heard you say that in one of your other podcasts as well. So it just kind of intrigued me. As much as you and I hate the traps of the criminal justice system, but for Black, brown, indigenous, and African people, why you would say put that fool on child support?
I think look, if you don't want to be in that child's life, that's fine. I can't make anybody. You can't make any. I have a student who's going through that right now, and I'm like, he doesn't want to be the father. What you gonna do? Right? There's nothing you can do about it. He don't want to do it. He wants, but I still think you got to pay.
Yeah,
I still think you got to pay. Right? I honestly believe you still got to pay, man. And I don't want nobody to go to jail, but how are you gonna get the money from them? Right? How are you gonna get the money from them? And look, we could talk all day about all the prison industrial complex and everything, but ultimately, the reason why she probably put him in the public schools, she probably couldn't afford it anymore, right? The least I'm not saying that's what she said.
Yeah, she didn't, but you got a good point there.
The least he could do is pay for that. The least he could do, right? The least you can do is pay for that. Like, come on, man. It's ridiculous, man. So she's going to raise a child by her own, all by herself. That's not fair. I don't think that's fair. It's not. And I see that happen a lot. I see that, I have students that they never met their daddy before. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, and then you see their mom struggling, you see their grandma struggling, and you're like, a little extra $200 to $300 a month ain't gonna kill nobody,
Well, I tell you what, I've met with some fathers and I've seen the destructive end of child support.
Same here. And I've been almost a victim of that end as well, right? But there are a lot of fathers that get away with murder, man. A lot of them out there that they not, it needs to be restructured. I agree 100%, right?
Okay.
And it should, and here's my thing. My thing is, to be quite honest, it should never go there. We should never go there, right? Like, we should sit down and say, hey, we can't be together. That's a given, but we on the same team. Let's work something out, right? But if you're not willing to do that, come on, man.
Well, I've often told young men when I find out that they've impregnated their girlfriend or their whatever, hey, you should be the person going to the court system saying, this is what I want to set up. I want to make sure my child is taken care of. I want to make sure that visitation is set up. Because at some point, that child is going to look at you, the father, and say, what did you do to be involved and to support my life?
Exactly.
And so if you can do that up front, and I know a lot of us don't like dealing with the court system, and I understand why.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If you can do that up front, and the few young men who did, who took my advice, or maybe it was my advice and 5 or 10 other people told them the same thing, whatever the case is, they acted on it, their situations are so much better. So much better. So, I tell people, look, if you're becoming a father and you're not married to that, the mother of that child, it's important that you be proactive and set everything up front. And a lot of times the guys that say, well, I don't want to, take her to court. What's that going to look like? Her family doesn't like me already, blah, blah, blah. They're going to hate you. That's fine. But
that's fine. Yep.
Man, you take care and you get everything lined up. You won't have to worry about that, because at some point that child will say, you know what? My dad and mom could not stand each other, but dad did everything he was supposed to make sure I was taken care of. So I'm actually glad that you told her, put him on child support.
Yeah, man.
I just hate the system because I've seen how destructive it is, and I've seen how women misuse it. Not all women, not a majority of women, but there have been enough women misusing the system, and in a way that's destroyed decent gentlemen,
No, and I agree. I agree with you on that. And it's just, but I see too often there's just the financial burden is left on them, and I just think it's unfair. I just think it's unfair, And,
gotcha.
And I see it a lot. Like, it's not something that I just see once. I see it too often.
And the other thing that I heard in one of your recent podcasts that I thought was pretty interesting is you dealt with the concept of male privilege.
Yes.
All right. What's your definition of male privilege?
We all, first of all, it intersects. And what I mean by that is that there are some modes of oppression that we feel and some that we don't because of who our identities are, right? So the best example I could give about what privilege is what is white privilege? That's the first thing I would say. What is white privilege, right? White privilege is going into Starbucks and hanging out and nobody saying nothing to you, right?
Right.
White privilege is when I get stopped by the police. If you're white and you get stopped by the police, they're going to always look like it's the police fault. But if you're black, they're going to be like, well, what did you do, right, for the police to stop you, right? And that's what the same thing with male privilege, right? I have certain privileges as a male that women don't have. For example, salary, how much I make. We know across the board that men make more per dollar than women does, right? On top of that, and that's just because I'm a man. It's not because of anything else. It's just male privilege is also, and it's relative. Privilege is relative, right? Because people will say, well, Danny, you don't have male privilege because if the police come around, they're gonna bang on your head. I say, yeah, you're right. But when I'm around women, right? Some of the women that we deal with, and we talked about this before, they have to act a particular way around men because, they're worried that we might do something to them. We don't have to worry about that, right? When we're walking down the street, we don't have to worry about what another guy's going to say to us, but a woman does, usually fearing for their life. So that's a form of male privilege, right? We don't have to worry about that, right? Another form of male privilege is women's clothes cost more than men's. Have you ever bought a bra for your wife?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny. You mentioned that in one of our other discussions, man. And I went back and I looked at some of the clothes that I purchased for wifey. And yeah, man, those rags are expensive, bro.
On average, yeah. I mean, now go shop for a bra. You're gonna be like, yo, this is expensive, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like that's just another example of male privilege. And the thing is, the scary thing about male privilege is that it's invisible. We don't know that we have it. We just assume, right? You don't know that we have. We say, what are you talking about? But that's not sexist. It is sexist, you know, and we don't see it. And that's the scary thing about privilege is that it's invisible.
Well, how do you think that male privilege impacts child support?
Well, let me take that back. I mean, I'm not taking anything back, but we know that the system was geared to lock up black and brown men and women.
Yes.
Let's just at the top, the very top, it doesn't do that. I don't think male privilege impacts the child support system at all, because if you go in there as a man and they're gonna hand you up, you know, and they're not gonna care about whether or not I lost my job last week, or I got a demotion, you know, or I got a new expense because my rent went up, or, you know, whatever went up, you know, or, I lost my car. So it's going to, you know, I need to get a new car. It's going to cost me more money. They don't care about that, you know? So when it comes to the child support system, there is no male privilege there. Now, where the male privilege comes in, and not in the child support system, is that the burden of child rearing is left to women. Even in marriages, we know that in marriages, women disproportionately do most of the child rearing. Don't get me wrong, there's exceptions to the rule. I know some husbands that they do a majority of it, right? I know some stay-at-home dads, so they do the majority of it. But they're exceptions to the rule. Across the board, even if the husband is a great guy, he does a lot less of the child rearing than a woman does, right? And on top of that, when we're talking about single parenting, right? When we talk about single parenting, the burden is always often left to the women, and the blame is always left to the women, because we always blame single moms for all these problems, and we never call out the dads.
That's interesting, because I was trying to connect male privilege with child support. And I was struggling with that as well, because when you talked about male privilege, it made me start thinking. I said, I wonder how deeply embedded and how pervasive male privilege is in family situations. And so you just talked about the bearing of the children, the raising of the children, and how it's predominantly the mothers or the mother figures. And I say that because I used to work in Portsmouth, Virginia, where it was at that point, it was like 65% of the children were being raised by other than the biological mother or father, because both the parents are crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of interesting to me that how pervasive it is. You know, when I say it, I'm talking about male privilege, and how it's interesting that when it comes to the system, male privilege disappears.
Yeah, and again, privilege is relative, right? Yeah. Privilege is relative. When we around white folks, that shit is gone, right? But right. Within our own community, is different, you know. And you see my point? It's relative, right? So it's difficult for us to fathom that, because we say, well, I don't have any male privilege when I'm around white people. Yeah, of course you don't, because that's racism. That's white privilege right there, right? Right. Now we're within our own community, that's where it's relative to. So again, like I stated, within the family, there's male privilege because women are expected to do most of the child rearing. We say, have you ever heard, I'm a nurturer, all right? I'm a nurturer, right?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? But we always see people say, well, the mom is supposed to be nurturing. Where does that come from, right? A male could be nurturing as well, right?
Now, right? You know what? I think in some cases we're looking at gender specific roles, and there's a lot of movement in, I guess in American current culture, where there people are shifting the roles and saying that the roles shouldn't exist. I'm starting to believe now, after looking at it pretty deeply, or as deeply as I can, that I think that we're trying to address symptoms of the problem without really dealing with the problem. I think the reason that people are looking at switching of the gender roles is because women have been demeaned, put down, and et cetera in America for so long, in such a pervasive way that now we're looking at everything and saying everything has to change. When the problem, I think, was we allowed ourselves to demean the women in the same way that the colonizers did their women.
And no. I got you 100%. But notice I never said anything about gender roles. Notice I said I'm a nurturer, right? I'm a nurturer, right? Why? Because I'm a parent.
I agree.
I'm a parent, right?
I agree.
But we always say that that's the role of the mom. And I'm like, well, I'm a parent too. I raise my babies too. Like, don't get me wrong. I can't nurse them from my breast, right? I can't do that. I don't actually physically bear them, right? But I'm raising them, right? I can do them too, right? And I think a lot of times we look at certain things and we see that as the realm of the women, right? Like, well, they need to teach them how to be emotional, teach them how to cook. No, we should learn how to cook and teach our kids how to cook too, right? We should do all those things too because we're parents. We're on the same team, right?
Yeah.
We're on the same team, and we should always do that. We should always be able to, we should always be involved in that aspect of nurturing our babies, right? And we should have just looked at it as just the mother role. But male privilege says, well, that's the role of the mom. I'm just a disciplinarian, but the mom could discipline children too, right?
I don't know if that's male.
That has nothing to do with gender role, and here's why.
All right.
If your curfew is at 10 o'clock, if you need to be in bed at 10 o'clock, it don't matter who enforces it. You got to be in bed at 10 o'clock, right? And whoever catches you in the act of sneaking in the house at 10:30, they should be the ones to discipline you, right?
I agree with that statement. I just don't necessarily agree that it's male privilege that says the woman should be taking care of the child.
I'm sorry. The patriarchy says, and male privilege is an extension of the patriarchy. I'm sorry, so, just like white privilege is an extension of white supremacy, right? It's white supremacy, and then white privilege is an extension of it. As is anti-blackness, as is racism, as in neocolonialism. That's all an extension of white supremacy. So the patriarchy is what says, well, the man is the king of the house, the woman does all the work, and they raise the babies. That's the patriarchy saying that. My bad. So maybe clear, right?
Salute to my highly progressive brother Dan Trey. But like I said, man, I'm still growing in that regard. So, man,
truly.
I appreciate that. But I think we've left Sister Shafina with some great information, and we actually have a minute left, man. So I appreciate you being on the Fly Guy podcast, which is actually, as I said to you in the email, kind of an extension of some of the things you talk about in a long discussion, different perspective format. So salute to you and everything that you're doing with, Where My Killer Tape At. I love that. And if you're not listening to his podcast, you should check it out on SoundCloud, on actually all the platforms now, I think, right?
Yes, sir. Oh, no, just Stitcher, SoundCloud, Apple Podcast, and Google Play. So the big ones, yeah. And I just want to say, I just want to let the audience know, first of all, thank you, Seko, but these were the discussions we were having when we used to hang out, 10 years ago. This was just normal on Friday nights at our Zulu meetings when we used to hang out after we broke down from DJing. These were the discussions that we had consistently. So we're just continuing that legacy, so.
And hopefully our children will do the same thing, man.
True indeed.
All right, man. Well, we'll catch up soon, man. And until that time, man, stay fly.
All right, peace.
Peace.